There you go. All right. So here we are. Good to have you here with us. Let me make sure that everything is working here. Seems to be that way. So welcome to our fourth class. Jesus helps people in need as we look at our Enduring Love study. And this is our fourth. We will have our fifth next week, which is really the end of the book. We don't have any more after that, which leads to whatever you want to do if you want to do anything Palm Sunday, but that'll be up to you to decide. I think that'll be up to you as the class. I'm open to meeting again, and we could discuss we can go over kind of what we've talked about, but I'll leave that up to you. So be thinking about that, what you want to do on that. So what I wanted to do as an opening worship, what our book tells us to do, or recommends, is that we pray Psalm 30, which is a beautiful psalm, and it's almost like written for call and response. Maybe it was sung. All the psalms were sung. And this is a perfect one for a chorus, a call and response chorus. So let's join together and pray Psalm 30. I'll lead. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and did not let my foes rejoice over me.
O Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me.
O Lord, you brought up my soul from Sheol, restored me to life from among those gone down to the pit.
Sing praises to the Lord, O you his faithful ones, and give thanks to his holy name.
For his anger is but a moment, his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes with the morning.
And as for me, as in my prosperity, I shall never be moved.
By your favor, O Lord, you had established me as a strong mountain. You hid your face. I was dismayed.
To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I make supplication.
What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell you of your faithfulness?
Hear, O Lord, and be gracious to me. O Lord, be my helper.
You have turned my mourning into dancing. You have taken off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy.
So that my soul may praise you and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever.
Amen. So, if we were to have a map of the world, I think when I did this class like a million years ago, I actually had a map of the world up there. And we were to place pins on the places of greatest need, where would you put those pins? Can you somebody share with me where you think we might, where would you place your pin? Where?
Are you talking about physical hunger and stress?
Just thinking right on top. Don't even think it out. Just where would you put? What? Where?
Gaza.
Gaza. Good. Okay, good. Where else?
I was going to say Gaza.
Okay. Where else? Any place of war, right? Ukraine.
Yeah.
Anywhere where there's such mass destruction and people have lost so much. Where else would you put it apart from war-torn places? Thailand. Yeah, because of natural disaster. Very good, natural disaster. Thank you. I was trying to think. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. I need to put that on the prayer list. What else? Where else?
Our country.
Let's hold that off right now because normally we would not do that.
Right.
Normally we wouldn't. If we were going to place pins, that's not where we put it. And we're thinking of comparison to other places in the world. Okay, so where else would you put those pins? Haiti, good, very good. Where else? Venezuela, okay. Africa, absolutely, yes. Where else? Think of other places. Now, let's stop right there. You will notice, what places did we not mention? What places do we not think of as places of need? Europe. put any pins in France. Did he put any pins in England? Did he put any pins in any of those countries, right? We overskipped Europe. And normally, we would not put any in the United States, would we? I mean, that's not, again, a place. Or Canada. Or Canada. Or, you know, besides Thailand, because of natural disaster, a lot of Asia, we probably would not do that, right? So we wouldn't put one in Australia, would we? And this is to point out that when we think of need, and you were hitting on this, Eileen, when we think of need, we think of it's mostly material need. And if whether it's by destruction or war, natural disaster, or simply by the plight of the people, whether it's famine or whether it's just a government that's not responsive to need, whatever you want to call it, we think of that as need. And so it's natural. Most people would put those pins in those places. But as Eileen mentioned a while ago, there are other types of need. So if we think about, let's say, spiritual need, what would that look like? Where would we think of places of spiritual need? What would that look like? Would there be a physical quality to that?
Chad?
What's that?
Chad.
Chad? Is that what you said?
Chad. Prison.
Oh, prison, jail. Okay, good. Jails do have worship, but that's excellent. Jails don't have churches, do they? They don't have, you know, now many prisons do have little mosques that they build and little churches that they build, but they're more like gathering. They're not permanent places, okay? So yeah, good, very good. Jails, excellent. Can you think of other places that would have spiritual needs? That you could tell by looking had a spiritual need, or that was lacking something that created a spiritual need. How about North Korea? North Korea. They are built around the cult of personality of their leader, and that's literally their religion. And so there is an underground. So there is an underground church, a huge underground church in North Korea, but you're never going to see it. You're never going to see it. It's there. It's there. Because if you're caught with a Bible, if you're caught trying to smuggle in Bibles, you're probably going to be executed, more than likely. And that happens. So there would be spiritual hunger in that kind of a place. And those kind of areas where any kind of spirituality is forbidden. What would a place look like that had the most emotional need? What would that place look like that had great emotional need?
What's emotional need?
Emotional need. Emotional need, depression. Any type of the characteristically emotional issues that we deal with. And there are many. There's just think of what psychiatrists and psychologists deal with. That's all they deal with is emotional need. So emotional need is a legitimate need that people have. And the reason we have so many psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors is for that reason. It's hard to get an appointment with a counselor. And that's true here, and that's true in many cultures. And some cultures, you wouldn't find counselors. You wouldn't find anyone to deal with the emotional hardships. Divorce. We can go into clearly the results of having emotional suicide. Suicide hotlines are an example of emotional need, right? Yes, go ahead.
Shelter.
What's that?
Shelter.
Oh, shelters. Good, excellent. Shelters. That again is both physical and emotional need, but shelters for abuse. I mean, that's perfect examples of where we see emotional need. We see the evidence of that in the fact that counselor services are packed, and that suicide lines run all the time, and that the social network itself is a place where you see great emotional need. Great emotional need. People who are lonely. What about loneliness? Nursing homes, retirement centers, hospices and hospitals and places where, and just people who are living alone. And again, that's emotional need, and it is great. It is great. Let's look at number 1 here. I'm going to read number 1. It's in your session book, session 4. If you want to look, it's up to you. And it's kind of a, you can tell it's kind of a pushing the level on a realistic dialogue, but at the same time, it makes a good point. Stan said lightly, I'd like to be a missionary in a foreign country where the people are really needy. Joan, his friend, replied, yeah, missions are important Christian witness. But I sometimes wonder if we need to look over our shoulders instead of over the world. Look over our shoulders instead of the world. What do you mean? Joan continued. Take Margaret, for instance. She's been home with her family for a number of years. She has mentioned that she is looking for a part-time job, but lacks some self-confidence, even after all of the experience she has gained through running a household. She could use some emotional support. After a moment, Stan said, I suppose I could listen a little closer when I'm with Margaret. And while you mention it, Bob McKenzie has been having a tough time of it since his wife developed Alzheimer's. There must be a way we can give him support, maybe even provide him with a break in caring for her. You're right, Joan. The needy are just over our shoulders. See, that's what I like this. It shows us something that we don't always see, that there actually is needy all around us, in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our you just look over your shoulder in the church. There is neediness everywhere. It's just not what we think of when we think of being needy, right? It's not what we think of. What about grief? People who've lost loved ones. I think I told the story here about the poor widower who called up a woman whose wife was the name of his wife who had died. I mean, that kind of neediness that we talk about is there. It is over our shoulders. So let's ask a couple of questions. How does God come to people who are in need? Obviously, a lot of people who are in need don't necessarily, there's the paperwork right there, don't necessarily feel that God is there. Many people don't. So the question that our lesson is asking is, how does God come to people who are in need? And how are we as God's people called to reach out to those in need? So keeping those questions in mind, we're going to read our scripture passages, okay? Let's keep those questions in mind. How does God come to people in need? And how do we, as God's people, how are we called to reach out to those in need? So we're divided into 1, 2, 3. And if you feel up to doing a little reading, I'll invite you to read each of these, one of you to read each of one of these segments. But it's up to you. I can read one of them too. One is the shortest. Would anyone like to read one? Go ahead, John.
When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered round him, and he was by the lake. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in.
Who wants to read number 2? Do we have a volunteer for number 2?
I'll read that.
Okay, please.
Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well. Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease."
Anybody want to do number 3? Do I have a volunteer for number 3? Liz, would you do number 3?
Sure.
Thank you.
While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her up by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know of this, and then told them to give her something to eat.
Okay, let's identify the people in need from these passages. Who are the people in need? Now, this story is really interesting. If you do a Bible study on this story, you learn it's a very unique story because it's a miracle within a miracle, or a healing within a healing, or as John would say, a sign within a sign. And there are a lot of interesting elements about it that's going on in this story. But the most interesting one, as any of the commentaries and scholars will point out, is Jesus is on his way to heal a very sick girl and who's dying, and he stops in the middle of it to help this woman. And I think that a lot of commentators would say this creates anxiety in the disciples, because that's why they were going, "Oh, it was the crowd. It was the crowd. We need to keep going. Let's keep moving. It's just the crowd. What do you expect?" But he's waiting. He sits there waiting. It's like the ambulance stops on its way to help someone else, right? And there's something wrong. It feels like there's something wrong with that. So let's go back. Who are the needy people in this story? In this, all these stories, who are the needy people here?
The father.
Jairus is, and what does he need?
He needs his daughter to not die.
He needs his daughter to be better, to be healed, to not die. Yes, and what about who else is in need?
The lady with the hemorrhage.
What? The lady with the hemorrhage. Yep. And who has been suffering for how long? 12 years, right? And she needs to be healed. And then there may be one we're missing here. Who's the neediest of all? The daughter. She's the neediest of all. She's dead. She needs life, okay? She needs life. So you've got, levels of need here. One represents a frantic father, okay? One represents a frantic father who's terrified, okay? So his need, how would you define his? Now, obviously, this is a very distinguished person, Jairus is. He is a leader. You call him a leader. So obviously, his need is not material, is it? So how would you describe his need?
Emotional.
It's emotional. It's emotional, correct. It's emotional. And then you've got the woman. And how would you typify her need? Why does she reach out to Jesus? Now remember the length of her illness. And what do you think she's been doing all those years?
Well, she's seen many physicians.
Or what else?
Well, she's had to be in isolation because of that, because of the bleeding.
But what else would she be doing all this time? If you were sick for 12 years, what would you be doing?
In isolation.
Right, but what can you do in isolation? What's the only thing you can do in isolation?
Right.
Pray. She's been praying. She's been praying. And why? Jesus doesn't come when he comes to that village. He's not coming through as a physician, is he? She's been to the physicians. They haven't helped. When you run, I think you make a good point, Billy. When you run out of physicians, when you run out of everything, you've only got one more place to go. So her need is spiritual. His need is emotional. Her need is definitely spiritual. She is reaching out. And she doesn't want Jesus to even know because of her uncleanness. Doesn't want Jesus to know that she has touched him. But it's clearly spiritual. She's not asking him to be her doctor. She's asking for a healing. So she touches it, okay? And the third one, the daughter, simply what is her need? It's all physical, isn't it? She needs to come back to life. She needs to live again. So here's a perfect example of a story that encapsulates the needs of individuals. The father's is emotional, the woman's is spiritual, and the daughter's is absolutely physical. So if we compare Jairus to the woman, what's the first obvious difference between the two of them? The most obvious difference of all, as Mark writes the story.
Well, he has the ability, he knows that he can ask Jesus. The woman knows she can't.
That's one, but let's start from the most basic. Jairus is named. The woman is not.
Jairus is what?
Jairus is named. We get his name.
Oh, name.
The woman, we don't know who she is. She's anonymous. Isn't that interesting? That we don't know her name. But Mark is sure to give us Jairus' name because Jairus is known, he identifies himself. The woman never gives Jesus her name. She is totally anonymous. So here's a difference, and you named one of the other differences very well. Jairus feels free to approach. He's comfortable with that. The woman is terrified to approach. So if you compare the status of the two within their respective communities or within that place and time, there is a massive gulf, isn't there? A massive gulf. Jairus has prosperity. Jairus has power. Jairus has, but yet he still has need. You would not look at Jairus on the street and go, you wouldn't punch a pin in Jairus, okay? And go, that's a place of need. That's a person of need. You wouldn't do that if you saw him, right? If you saw him, you wouldn't. And you wouldn't even see the woman probably. Yet we know from the story that she has great need. She has no status. She has no income. She is the one who we would put the pin in probably. She's the one we would put the pin in. So there's a difference. And of course, in action, as Liz so well pointed out, Jairus comes forward. He's comfortable doing that. And he doesn't demand, but he certainly begs and asks, right? And the woman, and by the way, the reason we know more about Jairus is because he's described more in the other God, in Matthew and Mark, in Matthew and Luke. There's a larger description of him. He is a leader of the temple. He's a leader. And so the disciples urge Jesus to do this healing. They urge him to do it. Yeah.
I just thought Jairus has a word that's used a lot now. He is entitled. He feels like he's entitled.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go. I want to take a read on that again. One of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, saw him, fell at his feet, and begged him repeatedly. So, I'm not so sure that certainly shows emotional need. And I'm not so sure that his falling on the feet was a humbling, it seems to me, a humbling of himself. So he humiliated himself by falling down at Jesus' feet.
But to be humiliated, he had to be higher up.
What's that now?
To be humiliated, he had to be entitled in a sense. I mean, for the woman to fall at his feet would not have been humiliating at all.
Right, you're right.
He had to come down.
But then why did the woman not fall at his feet then? She didn't. She hid in the crowd and reached out to touch him.
But if you fall in the crowd, you're going to get trampled. I mean,
But,
all
yeah.
he wanted to do was physically touch him.
Yeah, but other people were yelling at Jesus to heal them. I'm sure of that. That was wherever he went, he had those kind of crowds. I guess what I'm saying is that I like to give Jairus a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And the reason I want to do that is because it was the disciples in the other versions of this, it was the disciples who said, you need to heal, you need to do what he's asking you. Jesus just went. He just went. And so Jesus didn't make that distinction. See, that's it. Jesus doesn't make the distinction between the woman with the hemorrhage and Jairus. The point is, Jairus is already identifies himself. It does it. What does Jesus do to that woman? I mean, she's been healed. She's done. But what does Jesus do?
Well, he called her out.
Why did he call her out?
When he says, your faith has made you well, I mean, that was a statement of benefit of faith. And he couldn't have said that if he hadn't identified her.
But he could have just let her go healed. He wanted to recognize her. He wanted her to identify herself. He made her into a person. He treated her as an equal. Come forward, daughter. Come forward. You know, who touched me? Come forward. And she comes forward. Why does she come forward? Why? She didn't have to say anything. Why did she come forward? It may have been that Jesus looked directly at her. But it could have been, what would have moved her to come forward, do you think?
She wanted to be healed.
Well, she was healed.
Oh, she was already healed.
Yeah.
But, I mean, she could have lost the healing, or that there was such an encounter to be healed that abruptly after 12 years that she was willing to show it too. I mean,
Yeah, okay. It could have been Thanksgiving. It could have been an act of thanksgiving. It could have been, but whatever it is, it was an act of obedience. Jesus said, come forward, and she obeyed that. She said, I will come forward. I will come forward. So her life had changed. She could be in public now and not be embarrassed. She didn't have to hide in the shadows. Jesus had called her out of the shadow and into life. In a sense, he resurrected her. Didn't he? He resurrected her. And as you well pointed out, when we talk about spiritual need, he didn't say you're healed. He said, your faith has made you well. That's the ultimate spiritual affirmation, right? So her spiritual need had been met. God had answered her prayer. That's what Jesus was saying. God had answered her prayer. Your faith has made you well. So he recognized them, and in doing so, he recognized their very specific needs. Jairus must have felt at least hope when he was journeying with Jesus to the house, to the Jairus' house. And the woman, she was healed. So he met those needs. So let's move on. And again, let's go to the next part. How did Jesus know that the woman had been healed? What did he feel? Tell me what he felt.
He felt power go from him.
He felt power go out of him. In other words, there's that sense, and boy, have the scholars argued over this one. There's that sense of inert power, of a kind of power that Jesus has that is almost like, I don't know how you describe it. It's like plug into a socket, right? That there's power that comes simply from touching him, And he felt the power go out of him. He felt that. It's been theologically argued for centuries what is going on there. But that leads us to the question, what kind of power does the church have in fulfilling needs? What kind of power does the church have in fulfilling needs? How do we make power go out of us to those who reach out to us?
Well, our mission, it's a combined community effort to gather resources and then disperse them where needed.
And what need are you thinking of?
I think food pantry,
But what kind of need is that?
that's the physical need.
That's the physical need. Good. The physical need is pretty easy, isn't it? The physical need is pretty easy. So what about the power of emotional need? What about the power of emotional need? Does the church do anything at all about that?
Well, there's a lot of exuberant good feeling during a worship service. There really is. That can be an emotional experience.
Let's think about people who are in emotional, yes, but let's think about people, not just in the church, people who are in emotional need. Does the church have power to help them? And in what way?
People often refer to the church as their family.
Right.
And I think the members react in very emotional support.
Correct. Yes. How's that emotional point done? How was it done?
A phone call,
Good. What else?
a card in the mail.
Card.
A prayer.
A prayer.
One thing I know.
Prayer is astonishingly powerful. Yes.
But people always say, I'm praying for you, and that's a nice thing. But I've always tried recently to be much more specific. I pray that
Yes.
you suffer less. I pray that your trip is
Good.
just to give a very specificity to the prayer.
And I think that's very good practice. I think that's a good habit to be in. Yes, Emmanuel.
My mom said, the prayer is very important.
Yes.
And the Bible says if two people together,
Yep. 2 or 3 people in my name.
powerful inside the prayer.
Yes.
Really do a lot of work.
It's
A lot of work.
exactly.
Think good.
Yes.
It do body help people in the body side. Example, homeless people.
Yes.
You make sandwich for homeless people.
Yes.
It gives the food to everybody.
Yes.
But it got something Trinity have power, and people never know is the prayer why the pastor and the community.
Yes. One of the things that I pray when I pray for people is, and I will pray that with that person if that is the situation, is that God be present to that person. I've learned not to pray for something. There's nothing wrong with praying for specific things, right? But the more I study the text and the more I think about it and pray about it myself, I realize that the power of that Christ gave to us in being the presence of the Holy Spirit was the presence of God to journey with us through these things. You might have heard me say that from the pulpit. Not to avoid the things we go through. You cannot avoid death. You cannot avoid sickness. You cannot avoid these things. But you're never alone when you go through them. And I think I said that. Christ is with us. The Spirit is with us. And that's what I pray for, the presence of God to be with that person. So, and then there's that. So there's that emotional need. We have the physical need, emotional need. And the emotional need also involves, we talk about prisons, right? We talk about prisons. Church can reach out to that area, can't it? It can find a way to do that. There's not an area of need that the church cannot connect itself to. Some way, some form, And like I said, it's as simple as prayer, which is very powerful connection, Or it's as much as going out to see somebody or learning about need. Sometimes learning about need is important. And 12-step program, the needs of those who are addicted, those things. So there's much the church can do. Are there times that we are touched when we touch others? Are there times that we sense that power of what the church does? Have you ever sensed that power before? And can you remember what that was like? Now, obviously, as a pastor, I do that a lot. I get to do that a lot in my work. But have you ever been touched yourself by that power in the fact of just helping people or in the fact of reaching out to someone? Yeah.
I have mentioned before, this very close friend,
Yes.
Judy, whose husband died, and she was a caretaker, and I've really reached out to her quite a bit, and it's been incredibly satisfying for me to feel that I can see little moments of being happy.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes, it is. That's why I try to, and Billy knows all about this. We get these volunteers, and they are joyful in what they do at the food bank. It gives them the greatest sense of purpose, whether they're students, whatever they are in their walks of lives, just being there to help other people. And I wish people would understand this. I wish more people would understand this. I'm not talking about being sacred work. I'm talking about whether it's sacred or secular. When you help others, you get a real sense of purpose for your life. Because so much of life feels purposelessness. There's purposelessness. It feels like, you sense you're trying to aim toward a purpose, but when you arrive at that purpose, you just start looking for another purpose. You just substitute chase after chase. But when you help people, that's kind of holistic in and of itself. You've helped to do that. You've helped to do that. And there is a deep sense of satisfaction, peace in doing that, I think. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you hear that from our volunteers, don't you? They love what they do. They love it. Even with all the hassles or things that might go with it, they love what they do. And that's kind of the silent work of the church. So let's look at the woman and Jairus and their approaches to Jesus and how that matches our approaches in the church, how we reach out to Christ. What did Jairus do in reaching out to Christ? What did he do?
He knelt
He knelt and
and verbalized.
he verbalized. He knelt, he verbalized, and he shared his dilemma. He shared his dilemma, right? So, do we do that here in the church? Do we do that?
We try to.
What's that?
Some people don't like to share as much as others,
Yes.
but we do share a need.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we certainly, with the work of the deacons and so forth, we give people that door to share their needs with us and for us to share their needs with them. And of course, they have a pastor they can share a need with as well. But there's that prayer, submission, asking, that opportunity to ask for God's help. Now, the woman, how does she do it? What does she do? How does she get her need met? What does she do physically? What does she do? She touches. How do we touch Christ? How do we do that? How do we touch Christ? And that's physical, isn't it? How do we touch the Lord in the church? How does that happen?
Well, by helping,
Good.
because he said, when you help the least of these, you help me. I mean, that can be a very physical connection.
That's very physical, yes. Or a handshake or a hug, yes.
Well, I was going to say, maybe this is probably off the wall, but through communion.
No, that's not off the wall at all. That's the book's answer. One of them, communion. The whole point of the communion and baptism are the physical aspects of that. The touching, the water, the elements, the touching of that, the donning of the ashes, that's touching. These are all things that we do, Hunting for Easter eggs. No, that kind of thing. Not about that, but nevertheless, we touch them anyways. Now, let's look at number 2. I haven't marked, I think, number 2 in the book. Let me check my time. We're getting along, but we're doing all right. Active faith. Do you see that? Down on the bottom of 34. Active faith. Everybody see that? I'm going to read it. Everybody got it? Okay. The woman slumped over the organ keyboard as the last chord of the postlude faded away. Pastor, she began as sobbing overtook her words, what are we going to do? 4 days earlier, Marta's father had died after a long illness. Just before the funeral, Marta's husband, Bud, had said, we've got to get out of farming, Marta. I've been over the books a dozen times. We can't go on like this. There is no way that we can pay the taxes that are due. And you know how the bills are stacking up. We need to get out before we go into further. Certainly, this would be something of emotional need as well as there's some physical need there, but I think emotional need, the anxiety of this dominates. But Pastor, the farm is our life. My dad helped us get started 27 years ago. I can't leave. Bud and I have spent the last few days arguing the point back and forth. I don't have the heart to leave, though I can't see any other option. This morning, my checkbook had 38 cents in the balance column. How am I supposed to buy milk for the kids? We need help. In her grief, Marta reached out in faith that the community of Christ would respond when she needed its support. For Marta, faith was not passive. She looked for help, and faith does imply action on the part of the believer. Look again at Mark 5:22. Notice the story. Jairus fell at his feet, sought him. In other words, Jairus fell at Jesus' feet as if he were in prayer to God for help. The woman with the hemorrhage also reached out to Jesus when she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. She too reached out in faith that in even touching Jesus' clothes, God's power would heal her. Faith moved both Jairus and the woman to reach out to God for help in their times of need. Even as a young child in a high chair will reach up, knowing that arms stronger than hers will pick her up and hold her. Jairus and the woman moved toward Jesus, trusting that the power of God was active in him. Think of a little child. Children are needy, aren't they? That's why we love them. They're needy. If you don't treat your children as needy, then you're not being, I'm not saying you're not being a good parent, but you have to, as a parent, you've got to recognize that your children, at least the younger ones, are very needy, right? They are. So when does a child normally, even though they are struggling constantly for their own independence, right? When does a child normally reach out to his parents? Think of those times. Think of those times. When?
Hungry.
Hungry. Good. Excellent. What else? When?
Hurt.
What?
Hurt. If they.
Hurt. Hurt. Very good. Where else? Children get scared. When they're afraid, oh boy, they'll go directly from wherever they are right to their parents and reach up. What else? When is a child? What about when a parent comes home? Parent comes home. Many times a child will come up and want their hug. They'll want their hug. They want to be they want to welcome. They want to welcome their parent home. They miss them. They were lonely without them. Or any time that a child needs security of any type, that child will reach out, won't they? Anytime they need, anytime, even things we don't understand that are scaring them, they'll reach out. And of course, the most common time is when the child wants to show love. They reach out. Children don't hesitate to do that. They are absolutely little emotional machines. And they are happy to show emotion, whatever it is. They do not learn to restrain emotion. That comes later. But they are happy they are looking to reach out and show love in as many ways as they can. And if you think about it, these are all needs that the church can provide. All of these are needs that the church can help with, all of them. We think about the church doing forgiveness. When a child is hurt emotionally, forgiveness if they feel they've done something wrong. Hope, the presence of God, healing, material providence, and all kinds of different things. The church can be active in its reaching out to others, and it can be passive. Just the existence of the church itself. And this is what I try to say. Our very being here reaches out. And my favorite story of that, which you've heard me share before, was from Ohio, when I was interim in Ohio. And we had the leader it was a huge AA group, massively large AA group, met in the basement. And the guy that had started it told his story about he was totally caught up in his addiction. He was going to kill himself, and he was walking down the street there I forget what street that was, in Worthington, Ohio. Goes right to Columbus, right there. Walking down the street, and he saw a light coming out of the basement of the church door. One light. All was dark. And he goes down there, and he opens it up. And there are people there. And from that point, he expanded that experience into becoming a leader in AA. And just that light on that church was in the right place at the right time for him. And you will not believe how many times just our being here has been the right place at the right time for people. I mean, of course, we're constantly seeking to help. We're constantly seeking for ways to reach out to others. But just our existence here, does that.
It's always surprising that people feel the need to be in a chapel or a sanctuary to pray. But, sometimes that if it's open and available, that's what they need at that time.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Yes, Emmanuel.
I want to say something very important. The time Lydia, my wife, is here.
Yes.
If she comes to church after the service,
Yes.
you gotta tell her. She tell her, Paula, all the kids, Paula, Gracia, and Peter to go to
Yes.
the front to pray.
Yes. Yes.
She do that every time.
Every time.
I asked her, why you do that? He said, you know what? You are powerful at Trinity.
Yes.
So you are powerful there.
Yes. Yeah.
I said, are you serious? Every Sunday, if she coming to the church, after the service, you gotta go to the front.
Yes.
By the
Yes. And pray.
Pray. So, like Mom said, if you go every time, the church is not open.
Yes.
You go to the inside the church, you pray, you can have something powerful.
Does the church, your church in Toga,
Yeah.
are they ever lock it, or is that always open?
No, you have one security guy
Lives on site.
live
Yes.
outside the church.
Yes.
So every time the church is open, you have the office of the pastor. And
Yes.
The pastor live the same
Right. Right.
place,
Yes.
the church and
Yes.
everything. So
Yes.
people walking go to pray and
Yes.
come up.
Very good. Well, and that's what I mean. And sometimes, I don't think a lot of people understand that the existence of the church is not a monolith. It doesn't just sit here. That, day to day things happen at a church. And day to day people come seeking. And it is, and so it's very existence. People come. And no, maybe people don't come to join, but they come because they have a need. Whether it's worship need or an emotional need or a physical need, and the church is here. So our reaching out, part of it's active and part of it's passive. And the passive part is simply, just like Jesus, walking through that village, there he was, with no intention of healing that woman. just being Jesus, walking through. And she reaches out, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
We have a friend who lives in the neighborhood.
yes.
And he finds it really comforting to hear the bells.
And there you go, perfect. I have one neighbor here who doesn't like it. Made us turn them down, but that's fine because they're very loud. But yes, those bells, just the bells, just the sound of a church being there. That's what church bells were originally for, to call people in and go, here we are, you know. Church bells are very powerful. They used to, when there was a death, like a death of a leader or a death of a recognized death, they would peal the bell. They would toll for whom the bell tolls, right? Yes, yes.
Yeah, something I want to say again is that the bell, if the bell is ringing, you know God calling you to pray.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Agreed. Agreed. So the church must use its power in all the ways it can to totally meet the needs of others. It must use its spiritual resources, its material resources, and its emotional resources. Look at number 3 in our book. And this is where we're getting near the end. Just as a parent responds to a child crying for help, so Jesus responds to the cries of people in need. A number of people in Bud and Marta's community, hearing of their situation, responded to it. As a result, healing began. Some people gathered money for the family, while others volunteered to take care of the farm chores so that Bud and Marta could spend some time away from the farm. During their time away, Marta and Bud began to think more clearly about their situation. They were able to consider more clearly the available options. Though the pain of their situation was no less, some hope began to make itself feel present. So that's what I mean. It gave them the opportunity to find the solution. They didn't come to heal them, but to give themselves an opportunity to find the healing that they needed. And that's a very passive way, but that's a very good example of that. In the story of Jairus, the woman and Jairus' daughter, Christ clearly deals with all the structures of their need. Physical health was restored. Relationships were made whole. Emotional confidence was established. So, as our book says, a reliance upon God that expects Him to take concrete action in Jesus and persist in this confidence, even in spite of the reality of death. That's kind of how it describes what Jairus did. So, the church's priority in meeting needs. Well, we talk about its continued existence, obviously. The church continues to exist. Sensitizing ourselves to recognizing the needs of those around us. How do we do that? How do we do that? How do we sensitize ourselves as a church family to recognizing need? I mean, I think we're very good at that, but how do we do that even more?
I mean, you can ask, but a lot of times people are not really, what do you need?
Yes,
And people are not always forthcoming.
that's right. That's right. You can ask. But sensitizing that there are needs out there you may not be aware of. How do we do that? I think our best tool is the classroom. I think that's one of our best tools that we can, using classes, sensitize people to the needs of others. We can use the sanctuary. And one of the things that we have not done, which I've really wanted to do, I'm not sure why we haven't done it. And it may be my fault. But I think the power of testimony is extremely important. And when you get someone who's experienced help, not necessarily from Trinity, but just help or experienced the need, and they come and they share it with the congregation. I think that's very, very powerful. I told the story of we were doing a stewardship program about the existence of the church. Why are we here? And he told that story from the pulpit, and there was not a dry eye in the place. He was a good speaker too. But he just told that story of the church just having one open door with the light coming out. What a powerful image that is. So he said, please, please keep the lights on and keep your doors open. That's what he said. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I think there is commitment, committing our hearts to this work. Committing our hearts to this work. And commitment, how do we express commitment in the church? How do we do that? How do we do that?
Showing up.
What's that?
Showing up.
Showing up. Good, good. How can we formally express commitment in the church? What do we do? How do we express commitment to mission in the church? What do we actually do in the sanctuary?
Collection.
Collection, good. Collection, what else? You're missing this one, but I'm sure it's happened here before. You commission. You commission. Have you ever done a commissioning? Where you do it for missionaries. In the sanctuary, you commission them to go out. You commission, it used to be, I don't know if you did it here, but where churches I served, we would commission the teachers, the Sunday school teachers. We'd commission them. We would actually gather around them and do a formal commissioning. You are commissioned to this work. We'd commission the missions. We commission. It's a really powerful way to bring the need and the opportunities that the church has to reach those needs. We need to do some commissionings. We will. We will. We need to do some commissionings. So I'm going to close with us reading Colossians 3, 12 through 17. Let's read this together. And that will be our closing prayer for this lesson. Let's share this from Paul. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom. And with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Amen. Our final official lesson will be Jesus' love is forever. And that will be next Sunday. So thanks for coming this morning. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you next